Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead. Hope you're having a fantastic day. There's a lot of things going on in the garden these days, and a lot of people are dealing with all kinds of problems. And one thing that never, ever, ever gets talked about is water. I want to talk about water, and I'm going to do that right now. Clearly, I'm going to talk about that right now, but this bed right here. So the last video I filmed yesterday, I usually don't do videos back to back, but I came out here today and saw how my squash plants grew literally overnight. And I said, look, I got to talk about this. It's time. So the squash plants are just exploding with growth right now. Now that being said, we got a little bit of rain last night. And so we also got a lot of lightning, but we're going to get to that in a minute. So don't you worry. We will talk about lightning. So we haven't had any rain here for about 2 weeks, which I was kind of worried because the bees over there need the water to cool the hive and make honey. So if you're interested in that, check out Sandy Bottom Bees. Just saying, that's the other channel that I started for bees. But there's a lot of times that this happens, and I remember specifically there was this one time I went out of town and I set timers, and I was super panicky because it was like height of the season. Everything was freshly planted, and I did not, more than anything, want the garden to not get watered. I mean, look, I don't know why people don't talk about it, but water is super important for the garden and everything on this planet. So I'm not so sure why, but back to the story. So we left, we came back, and I set my timer to water, and I watered it the day before, I watered it the day of, I amped up the watering. I said, look, I'm just gonna overwater just in case. What if the hose breaks, something like that, and there's just an issue. And then, not to mention, while we were gone, it rained on top of that, so we were just watering constantly. And when I came back, my beds were overflowing with plants. They had all exploded in growth just like that. So that led me to think, are we really underwatering our gardens? I mean, you've all heard, like, if you run a sprinkler, put out, some tuna cans or something and see if you're getting about an inch a week. And I don't think that's quite right. And, it's up for discussion, and I'm cool with that. I did, real quick, we did a video like two or three videos ago, and it was the garden advice that I could give you, the most important I can give you, and that was just like, hey, it's not up to chance that your garden failed. Well, what that video was me weeding YouTube. So people who didn't like it and unsubscribed, they don't need to be here. They don't need to hear what I got to say, because I can't handle it. Because that's just like with this. If you think you're underwatering, put the water to it. There's all kinds of ways to water. And over the years, I've done many different kinds of watering. I've hand watered, I've run sprinklers, I've run misting systems, and now I'm running a drip system, which I'm more than thrilled with, I have to admit. And I have to have a little bit of egg on my face. Let me get it off. Because at one point on the Backyard Gardens podcast, I had made the bold statement that I did not like drip systems and I was not interested in it. But what I did is I had bought a cheap one and it just didn't work. And when I built my own, it changed the game. So that's where I stand right now in my journey, is I'm a drip system individual, and it's working for me. It allows me to control how much goes into my garden. So we can go through here and turn off individual beds if we need to. We can do all kinds of things with it. It gives us a lot of flexibility. But, I set my timers for multiple ways during different seasons, and it's driven by two things. One, it's driven by temperature, and two, it's driven by mulch. And also the plant. So 3 things. So what that means is in the spring, early spring, it's cool. We water about once every 4 to 5 days with our drip system for about 80 minutes at a whack, okay? And then what happens is, as it gets warmer, we'll lower that. So then we'll go to 4 days. And then I've landed with the drip system. This is really important. I've landed at about 3-day intervals. Unless we're getting a crazy heat wave, then I'll definitely go to every other day. But for right now, I'm at 3-day intervals, and it stays that way for most of the season. So you may ask yourself, well, why do you change it for mulch? Well, the mulch will help retain the moisture in the ground, especially the surface level. And so that's really important, but also plant cover makes a big difference too. You know, this bed, even though it's looking really good and I'm happy with it, I do have a blank spot here, which I think is actually gonna work out pretty good. It's still exposed soil versus if we come over here to this bed, this pepper bed, you can see that I've got to come in here and I've got to do another fertilizing too now that I see it, because I can barely get into it. But you can see there's not a lot of showing soil, and in the coming days and weeks, this will overflow and just fill up the bed completely. And so we need to make adjustments for that. Now, the one good thing about a summer garden is I don't really, if this bed is more filled with plants and it's not drying out as much as this bed, I don't really adjust anything. So even though I have the ability to turn off the water to individual beds, I still don't do it just because it's plenty hot. Now, if I were to see an issue, then I may do something like that, but for the most part, I don't. But then when you come to something like this, where we have potatoes, and I said it right, potatoes, or taters, as I like to say. When we have our taters, we don't want to overwater them too much because you can cause cracking and stuff like that. And even with your tomatoes, this is where I get killed every time. With your tomatoes or maters, then you kind of got to be careful with that. So as we get into the season, you'll start to see that the tomatoes will grow, but if you overwater, you're very inconsistent with your watering, you can cause cracking in your tomatoes, and we don't want that. So we definitely will, at times, if we're gonna get really heavy rains, we will turn the water off to this bed just to help mitigate that. But in the middle of the summer, it's not a big issue. And now, shout out to the garden being profitable video. I had said that I needed to get some more tomato cages, and I went to the store to go buy them. Bruh, I had to buy $50 worth of tomato cages. So you know, your boy didn't buy $50 worth of tomato cages. No, sir or ma'am. That's not gonna happen. So what I did is I ended up doing a Florida weave on the other 2 beds that have them. And I pulled some out of the trash that I had thrown away that were broken and said, you know what, we're just gonna run it, because that would ruin my profitability. So I just wanna kind of give you an update on that. So plants like these onions here, they require a lot of water. The sweet potatoes that are gonna go in here tomorrow, they do not require a lot of water. And what I found is the more I water, the drier the flesh of the sweet potato gets. And then you come here to where the corn's gonna be, and it's gonna require a lot of water. So we have to manage all of that. Now, the good thing is, again, I can turn off, like for this one, a lot of times I'll turn off the water to this bed and I'll water it once a week. Especially as we get closer to harvest time, the sweet potatoes will not be watered hardly at all. We'll just let them roll. So it's important to have that ability, but if you don't, it's not a huge deal. You just may not get, in some crops, what exactly you desire. Now let's talk about this lightning thing. So my theory has always been, one, rainwater is best. And when I say rainwater, I don't mean collected rainwater. I mean water falling from the sky. Because what happens when you collect rainwater is, as it sits, like if you take a bucket of tap water and you put it out, and a lot of times people will say, hey, let it rest for a day or two and let some of the, I don't know what it is, like the deposits and stuff, they kind of evaporate out of it. I think that's what happens when we store our rainwater as well. So when the rain actually hits it, you know, I remember when I was a kid, everybody would freak out about acid rain. Do you guys remember that? And it'd be like, oh, it's gonna burn your skin. And they'd say that, and I'd be outside in the rain talking about, oh, it feels so good. Yeah, I love it, I love it. But it you know, I think there's something in the rain. It could be chemicals from, you know, the clouds and the atmosphere and stuff like that that are just really good for it. This is not the place for people to talk about contrails and all that stuff. I'm not doing that. So let's not crack that one open. But I think there's something really good about fresh rainwater hitting your plants. Now, the other thing is, it's been brought to my attention, and I need to do a little bit more research on it, and don't you worry, I will, is apparently the lightning supposedly will help your plants absorb nitrogen. I don't know if it's true, but looking at that bed right there, I am going to give it a little check mark in the pros box. I'm pretty sure something occurred here. There was nothing added to this bed as far as fertilizer or anything within the past week that would give it the boost that it got overnight. So I don't know if it's true or not. I'm gonna look into it. I'm gonna see if there's been a scientific paper done about it. On that note, if you guys wanna learn something, don't go to the blogs, don't go to Johnny Bilbo Pete down the road. Look up a scientific paper and suffer through the 10, 15 pages it takes. A little tip, if you find a paper written scientifically, you read the abstract part of it and the conclusion, and then you can see if you really want to get into the meat and potatoes of it. That's kind of how you can work around that. But that's where you really need to get some of your information. You know, there's, you know, electroculture and stuff like that. There's some pretty good papers written about that. And I think what I really want to say here is, no matter what we do as humans, we cannot mimic the power of nature in our gardens. Meaning, if you are an electroculture fan and that's something you're into, no matter what, you can't mimic the effect of a lightning storm. If this is true, I think that you really need to understand that a bolt of lightning is so powerful. There's so many millions of volts within that you just cannot mimic that. And so there's nothing you can do about it. The way I look at it is, if this is the rain, this is the lightning, all that stuff, it's a gift from God that we get this in our gardens to get that boost that we need. I mean, if you think about it, is it any surprise to you that in the spring we get thunderstorms and lots of rain, generally speaking? I mean, I know some people are having it dry this year, but you know, generally speaking, April showers bring May flowers. And I mean, it's amazing. And so as we get into the warmer months and we start getting hotter and hotter, we need to start thinking about our water tendencies in our garden. Just gonna say it, you need to water more. I guarantee it. Now, if you have a heavier clay soil, you definitely need to be careful. But if you've cultivated raised beds, and a big argument for raised beds is that you know the soil makeup, you know the condition that it's in, then this is why we do it, because I know how much water can go in there. I know what it feels like when it's soggy. I know all of that. We still need to do the things we do to manage moisture, meaning mulch, meaning densely planting. I believe in densely planting completely. If you can't tell, densely planting is everything that I do. So that helps with it. And then when it gets hot, you definitely have to adjust how much water you add to it. So just think about it. Water is everything. If you don't drink the amount of water, we can only live 3 days without water. We can live 2 months without food, I think, a long time. But with water, 3 days, and then you start to feel the effects of dehydration. It's the same with our plants. So don't starve them out, because the water does more than just keep them alive. It transports the nutrients from the roots all the way up into the leaves, and then that creates that process through it. You know, that's what makes it happen. So just think about that this year as you get it. And trust me, if nothing else, just water 25% more this year and see if I'm wrong.